Sometimes it's very difficult to get information out of Olympia. Capitol Press Corps is somewhat condensed these days, and so we want to make sure that you are kept up to date on what is happening at the Capitol. We're going to bring in our WPC Vice President for Research, Paul Guppy, to just go over some of the budget situations that are happening specifically with this income tax issue, Paul, so we can make sure people are up to date on that, because it's probably going to come to a head this week.
That's right. So where it stands now, well, I'll give you a little, as a policy organization, we always like to try to give some background. So there has been literally decades of effort in this state by people on the left to create a state income tax in Washington state. We are one of only 9 states that has no state income tax. And there are definitely activists in our state who want to take us off that list and get some kind of income tax imposed in our state. They have made that effort 10 times in the past. It has gone before voters, and voters have rejected it every single time, 10 times in a row. This time, we're seeing a little bit of a different effort. Governor Inslee has proposed a state income tax in the past. He did so again earlier actually it was in December when he proposed his budget. The Senate considered that tax first. It's a narrower capital gains income tax on the earnings from investments above a certain level. So those details are provided on our website. And this was a little unusual. In the past, this had been defeated in the Senate because there were some Democrats who did not want to go on record being in favor of a state income tax. This time, the Democrats ran it in the Senate first, and it passed by 1 vote. And so what that means is that they're pretty confident they can get a good majority in the House. And in fact, the House did pass their own version of the state income tax on capital gains. So where we are today is that those 2 different versions have been passed. In the Senate, one of the conditions of some, again, Democrat members was there could not be an emergency clause attached to the bill, which would block a popular vote later in the fall about whether to, once again, for voters to vote down a state income tax, which is what most people expect. So these senators said, I'm willing to go on the record to vote for this, but I'm not going to take away the ability of the public to vote on it later in the year. And that version passed the Senate. What happened in the House was a little bit of a game where they didn't officially add a, quote, emergency clause to it, but they just took the same wording. So again, that's the great thing about being an analyst. Jason Mercier on our staff read through and he said, wait a minute, I see this phrase that says, this bill is necessary for the operations of the state. That sounds an awful lot like emergency clause language, which would then be used by a court in order to block a vote by the voters. So this is a little convoluted, but my point is that we see this maneuver, wording game going on in the House, which the Senate did not do. So where we are today is the Democrats have to decide whether they want to keep this initiative blocking language in the bill. If they do, then it's going to have to go back to the Senate to be voted on. And again, there are some Democrat senators that are going to face a very tricky vote about whether to vote, number 1, impose a state income tax, and number 2, include this language that would block a public vote.
Yeah, some of the other things that were in that new House version, Paul, is that it's got a marriage penalty in it. It's got the ban on charitable deductions in terms of getting a deduction on the state portion of your the new income tax. A lot of the things that I think people would say, you know what, this is an income tax that proves it is an income tax because of the different things that you're doing with the forms that you have to fill out and the deductions that you get and that marriage penalty. But things that I don't know necessarily that the senators who are right on the edge of this debate are going to be all that in favor of.
Yeah, so this is just weighting it down. And of course, everything that you described, again, applies to a standard state income tax in any one of the 41 states that already has one. So that demonstrates this model that once this, what is today a narrow tax on high profits from an investment, okay, which at first will only affect a few percentage of the people in the state. And that's what the proponents say. It's a tax only on the very wealthiest. Don't worry, everybody else. Have you heard this before? It's not going to affect you. It's only on those rich people. Don't worry about it. And then when we start to see that the elements that you described, Chris, about you're not allowed charitable deductions. There's a marriage penalty in this bill for sure. Another element that you didn't mention is when you file for this tax at the state level, you have to provide your federal tax return. So there's a privacy concern there. Every one of those elements exactly mirrors provisions that are in state income taxes elsewhere. And so we would expect that once it gets in place, it will then be gradually expanded to more people. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.